Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing well out there, and I certainly appreciate you folks tuning in this morning as we continue to discuss Hurricane Lee. And in the second half of the video, we'll talk about what's going to happen weather-wise for today. We'll give you all the latest and greatest information on this very large storm out here in the Atlantic. As you can tell, it's very close to the eastern U.S., but of course, not impacting the eastern U.S. But we'll talk about all the latest information that we got, how he's doing out there, the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We'll talk about some model guidance, but I can tell you, we're pretty much to the point with models that, you don't throw them out the window and don't even look at them. But what we can tell you here is most models are agreeing, well, where this is ultimately going to make landfall. Maybe not the exact location, but we're really zoomed into one specific area that this will most likely make landfall at. But we know that this is a very large storm, so just because the center of this low-level circulation makes landfall in one place, that doesn't mean that areas hundreds of miles away from the center won't be impacted. We know that they will. So we'll give you the information on that as far as impacts and just talk about it all in this video. Thank y'all for the amazing support over the last couple weeks between talking about Idalia, Hurricane Lee, and I just want to say thank y'all so much. It's a grind doing these videos twice a day, but you guys make it worth it when 99% of the comments are encouraging and nothing but positive feedback. So thank y'all. It makes it worth it. I really appreciate it. If you notice that I don't have as much energy on this video, I'm just a little bit tired this morning. So we'll pump on through this video, pump out some good information for you folks, and then you guys can get on with your day. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below so I can do that and so others can do so too. So this is Hurricane Lee on your screen. Very large storm. But just because it's a large storm, that doesn't mean that it's any stronger than what it was. In fact, it's pretty weak. I mean, I wouldn't say it's pretty weak, but it's definitely weaker compared to what it's been over the last several days into last week. It's a Category 2 hurricane still, but definitely has weakened since yesterday evening's video. But it's starting to make that very close pass to Bermuda. Bermuda already starting to see some outer bands from this, probably some gusty conditions, and this will make a pretty close pass to Bermuda. And with this being such a large storm, it's certainly going to bring impacts to Bermuda. In fact, they got tropical storm warnings up right now. This is already moving north, so everybody who was saying this is not going to move north, well, Lee is moving north now. So, and that's not a knock on you guys. If you guys had a gut feeling it was going to move into the southeast, then, I can't discredit your gut feeling, but Lee certainly is not moving due west anymore. He is definitely moving north. So, Lee's Category 2 hurricane, pretty healthy Category 2 hurricane, but will continue to weaken and then reach Category 1 status sometime over the next 24 to 36 hours. Another great way to look at this is this really shows us these colder cloud tops, warmer cloud tops. We know that these colder cloud tops indicate higher or stronger updrafts, which means, and this basically would mean that it's firing convection, and it's beginning to become a little bit more void of those stronger storms with the core, which is right into here. I mean, you still got the northern side, which is popping off some intense convection. Of course, you got some intense kind of outer eye wall convection going over here. But if you notice right here, there's some dry air getting wrapped into the southwest and southern side of Hurricane Lee, which was expected, and it's starting to kind of dry out some of this convection. But still a healthy hurricane as of now, just kind of losing some health out there. Latest information from the National Hurricane Center, the cone of uncertainty, still a 100-mile-per-hour hurricane. So still a powerful hurricane moving north at 9 miles per hour. As you can tell, it might move north-northeast at some point, then back north, then actually move north-northwest, and ultimately make that landfall somewhere in the downeast areas of Maine, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick, somewhere in this area. It might ride right into the Bay of Fundy, and eventually the center of the storm make landfall somewhere in there. Should be an extratropical storm by the time it gets to Newfoundland, and we'll see what kind of impacts it brings to you folks up there. But we got hurricane watches now issued for the western coastline, southwestern coastlines of Nova Scotia and also New Brunswick. This does include areas like St. John. So they have issued these hurricane watches for you folks in Canada now. Another way to look at this is Zoom Earth. This will probably weaken into a Category 1 hurricane sometime over the next probably several hours into this afternoon. And by the time we're getting into tomorrow afternoon, it should be an 85-mile-per-hour hurricane, still a very large storm. It's gradually weakening, and then by the time we get into Saturday afternoon, the storm should be right around here, just south or southwest of Nova Scotia. And my bad, in St. John, you actually have tropical storm watches. A little bit further down the coastline to your west, you have hurricane watches. So sorry for the misinformation there, but you got tropical storm watches up, even for the coastal regions of Rhode Island, all of the coastal regions, and just basically if you're tucked up against the coast in Massachusetts, you certainly have tropical storm watches. Tropical storm watches up for the coastal regions of New Hampshire, and pretty much halfway up the coast in Maine, and then it goes from tropical storm watches to hurricane watches. And this goes all the way up to some portions of coastline of New Brunswick. So I know you're thinking, this is only a tropical storm, Mitch. Well, this is going to be a pretty large tropical storm, extra tropical storm, because it will lose those tropical characteristics. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But this is going to be a very large storm. A lot of people in the comments, not a lot, but I've seen a few people saying, Mitch, don't downplay this storm here in Canada or the U.S. And I'm not downplaying it because, I was kind of saying often that I wouldn't compare this to Fiona. But I will still stick to saying that I don't think this is going to be as bad as Fiona, but it's still going to be a high impact storm. And, you got hurricane watches issued for portions of southeast Canada for a reason. So you're probably going to get hurricane force conditions in some areas. So let's just hope that this storm is going to be big, but let's hope that it doesn't pack a huge punch. But that's why we've made 2 videos a day, to keep you all well aware of the latest information that we have on what this could potentially do. But the track, this really picks up some speed as it goes from here 2 a.m. Sunday all the way to here 2 a.m. Monday. So it covers a lot of ground and water in a 24-hour period as it gets into the northern portions of Newfoundland. So latest model guidance, we'll really talk about the GFS. I feel like the GFS has done a little bit better than the Euro. And a lot of people ask, Mitch, which model do you think is better? Well, I think historically the Euro is better, but sometimes the GFS certainly wins battles. And I feel like the Euro was ticking a little bit too far west. Now, this thing can ultimately do exactly what the Euro said. But from what we're starting to gather, we're really starting to think maybe the GFS was a little bit more right all along with more of that easterly track. That doesn't mean that you folks in Mass and New England aren't going to get impacts. You certainly are, but anyways, here we go. We're getting to Friday evening. This is the GFS, the latest GFS, making that move north, and then it kind of jogs maybe north-northwest, but it's still a very large storm. We do not want this big old wind field and area right here, because we know that the west side of this storm will be the worst side of the storm, because dry air is going to get wrapped into the southern and then eastern side of the storm. We don't want this big area to get on land. We want this to weaken. Ultimately it is. Eventually, it is going to make it on land to landmass, but we need this thing to really weaken. And as it continues to move north, you get into Saturday morning, you start to see impacts in areas of eastern Mass. And even though you don't see any green over here in southern New England, you very well could be seeing a wind-driven rain and some gusty winds. And you're certainly starting to get impacts in the down east and coastal regions of Maine and Nova Scotia. And here comes this storm right now. We'll go on and flip it to this. And here it is down here Saturday morning. We're getting into mid-morning, and it looks like it jogs almost northwest at a certain point. And here it comes. It starts to creep really close to the town of Yarmouth, and then it continues to move north. We're getting into Saturday afternoon at this point, and it's right off the western coastline of Nova Scotia. But this west side is really battering areas of the down east regions of Maine. It's rain's starting to pick up. Gusty winds are starting to pick up in the St. John region. And here it comes. It technically makes its first landfall in western Nova Scotia. Okay, moves in, and I would say the actual center of the storm on the latest GFS moves in just north of Yarmouth, and then rides up kind of the northwestern coastline to the Bay of Fundy of Nova Scotia, and literally just kind of makes an abrupt turn right into the bay. It's going to be interesting to see if this actually does that. This center of low pressure never actually moves into St. John like we were showing last night based off this latest run. But, St. John being right into here. And this would bring the actual core of the storm really close to you guys. Strong winds. I know that you guys measure winds differently, but as far as miles per hour, certainly 40 to 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts are most likely, not sustained necessarily, but most likely going to get wind gusts at that speed. And this continues to move and basically moves right over areas of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and then rides right into Prince Edward Island. Begins to impact, I think that's Charlottetown. Yeah, Charlottetown, and all the towns and communities in this region right here. And this is around Sunday morning, early Sunday morning. The storm is very large still. It's probably losing a lot of its steam, but still producing some heavy rains and some strong wind gusts as it continues to move east-northeast. And then it could eventually affect maybe northern Newfoundland for sure. But I think by then, I think the storm will just be kind of producing some heavy rain and just some gusty winds. I just think that by the time it gets way over here, I think it's lost a lot of its steam. We will look at the Euro really quick here. The Euro is still further west with this system initially. We're getting into Saturday morning and brings more of this western side much further west into areas of New England. So it could bring more rain for you folks and some gusty winds. But as this continues to move north, this ultimately kind of follows what the GFS does and eventually curls back north and then back northeast and then makes that landfall sort of similar to the GFS, but doesn't quite move that center of that storm right into the western tip of Nova Scotia. In fact, it jogs it back north. And you don't want this area in yellow, where the most intense portion of the storm is, to move over you, but this certainly moves over to the portions of the down east areas of Maine, right over the St. John area, and kind of moves right into New Brunswick, and continues to move north and affect you guys, and then starts to affect Prince Edward Island. In general, the Euro is more west, and then ultimately goes a little bit further north than the GFS model does. The HAF model really shows what happens to the elements, I guess you would say, of Lee, the characteristics of Lee, if you will. This will continue to move north, and you got all this dry air right here. At this point tomorrow morning, you already got some dry air being wrapped into the circulation, right? But with all this dry air sitting over the mid-Atlantic and northeast and even areas of the southeast, basically, we'll go on and move it forward. We'll stop it here. All this dry air gets wrapped into Lee's circulation. It comes down from this way and then gets wrapped well into its circulation. So basically, this pushes and keeps all the moisture on the west side and northern side of Lee. So wherever this area of the storm goes, that's where you'll get the most rain. Okay. And, if this trends a little bit further west in the next day or two, this would bring a pretty large rain field right into southern New England, which is an area that does not really need any more rain. But this is why this storm loses its tropical characteristics. It gets a lot of dry air wrapped in, becomes more of a cold core storm, kind of merges, if you will, with this trough. And it's not really a tropical system at this point anymore. It goes extra tropical is what we call it. So we keep this going here. And as far as wind speeds, we'll go off the National Weather Service now here in the United States. And a broad look, as you can tell, some higher wind gusts in some of these higher mountaintops here in Maine and New Hampshire. We move a little bit closer down to our folks in southern New England. Could get some 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts out here in southeast Mass, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, Cape Cod regions, Cape Cod Bay. And you'll get a stout northerly flow right into the Cape Cod Bay that will produce 2 to 4 feet of storm surge most likely. But, you could get a 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gust in the Boston and some gusty winds. As far west as, western Mass, western Connecticut, even into areas of Vermont. But, nothing too crazy at all. Now, if this was the trend west, then of course the more higher wind gusts would shift further west. So we'll have to watch for that a little bit further up the road for you guys up into Maine. And I really think if you're tucked up against the immediate coastline, especially the down east areas of Maine, you folks could get some hurricane force wind gusts. Pushing over 75 miles per hour. I mean, that's why you got the hurricane watches up for the northern half of the coastline of Maine. But definitely some gusty winds, especially if you're a small town or community really tucked up against the coastline here in Maine. I mean, this is going to be, kind of equivalent to a nor'easter. Maybe stronger, maybe weaker. You guys will have to tell me after the storm how you would relate it to a nor'easter. I would love to know. But it definitely is going to pack a punch for you folks. So definitely be aware of this. Let's take a look at the GFS, and this is in kilometers per hour. Really focus on our folks in Canada here. You know, it's showing a wind gust, maximum wind gust on the GFS of 109 kilometers per hour around the St. John area, saying a maximum wind gust of 94 kilometers per hour. Just down the road here to your west, it increases substantially. Very gusty winds into the Bay of Fundy. And, maximum wind gusts in the Charlottetown region, 80 kilometers per hour. That's not a forecast. It's just model guidance. But as you can tell, the further northeast and east you get, yes, there is gusty winds. Like we'll go to Newfoundland. There is gusty winds, and even into Newfoundland. I mean, you got 60 to 70 kilometers per hour into Newfoundland. But, it certainly drops off. The storm loses some steam. It doesn't really lose its size, right? But it definitely loses that really strong wind field. The wind field is there, but it's not as strong. Let's hope that actually is the case. But I definitely think you got to get into the western sections of Nova Scotia, down here to the St. John, points west region, to really get those strong tropical storm, maybe even some brief hurricane force winds. The timeline of the winds, I'm not going to say all this out for you guys. Just, freeze the screen if you need to. But this is the kind of the timeline of when you can expect tropical storm force winds in these regions. So we're finally getting to the arrival of this storm. I'll be completely honest with you guys. I always will be. I'm sick and tired of talking about Hurricane Lee. I'm ready to talk about something else. Unfortunately, there's another system right behind this that we need to watch. Nothing to be concerned about right now, but we need to watch. But for you folks that are new to the channel, and I'm not going to ramble here, I'm a big winter weather fan. So I'll be looking forward to talking about winter weather for sure. That's definitely the thing that I love to talk about the most when it comes to weather. But storm surge has not changed from last night. 1 to 3 feet of storm surge, most likely for everybody in the blue. Then 2 to 4 feet into the Cape Cod Bay and just the Cape Cod region into here. Rainfall expected. My folks in Canada just convert this to millimeters. I don't have any more panels pulled up. I do apologize for you folks up here. Just reminded myself, just remember right in the middle of doing this video, I forgot to pull it up. But as far as the National Hurricane Center, as far as inches, 4 to 6 inches of rain here into like Halifax and certainly Yarmouth, and then portions of southwest Nova Scotia, and then the down east areas of Maine into very small sections of New Brunswick right into here. Certainly could get, anywhere from 2 to 6 inches of rain. So, it looks like this has shifted a little bit further east. We'll see if that continues or remains about the same. All right, so the weather for today, upper trough still in place. It's beginning to weaken somewhat over the northern and northern east portion of the U.S. We still got a pretty moist zonal flow right over the south, but it's not as moist as this is kind of showing. There's actually a lot more dry air down in Tennessee than what this is showing, but we expect Lee to help pull down some dry air further down to our folks here in the Carolinas. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be honest, for us folks in the Carolinas, the dry air push is not looking as great as it did say back over the weekend, but it's still going to be a nice air mass as we're getting into Friday and through the weekend. Still a nice little cool down. But as far as what's coming down from the sky, a lot of rain in the south central U.S. Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and some rain moving into Alabama. We got some rain up here in the northern plains and north central U.S. and some rain that's beginning to exit the northeast coastline. As far as storms today, there will be a marginal risk for severe storms down here in Texas, eastern New Mexico. Outside of that, just a general risk of storms in the light green. Excessive rainfall outlook. I really think if you're in Denver and the eastern sections of Colorado, a lot of rain can fall today. And then the heart of Texas, you guys are making up for lost ground as far as rainfall quickly over the last few days. But, you know, some of these areas, the soil cannot keep up, and you could get some flooding where you have a slight risk, at least a 15% risk of flash flood guidance being met. You see these tropical storm watches up in the lighter shade of red up here, and then the hurricane watch is up also for areas of the coastal regions of Maine. So, you know, we got a tropical system on the way. A few counties down here in South Texas with heat advisories where we'll get hot today. Southeast, just a stout kind of zonal moist flow right here across the south. This is kind of getting squashed down, but I certainly think if you're in western Georgia, some storms with fire today. Pretty much anywhere in Texas Florida has a chance to see showers today, some tropical downpours. Same thing in southern areas of Mississippi and Alabama. And then we could get some stormy conditions to right out of Texas into southern Louisiana today. Could be dealing with some showers, especially in Georgia throughout the evening. These could be in southwest North Carolina too, and we could wake up to some showery conditions, and even in South Carolina tomorrow morning. And the HRRR model is liking the idea of a cluster of storms tomorrow morning, kind of right down here near the Columbus area of Georgia. The Northeast, a pretty quiet day today. You guys will have an opportunity to dry out after some crazy weather this week. Had some tornado warnings yesterday. Definitely been in some issues with flooding. You have an opportunity to dry out today before, you know, Lee makes its approach. So not a whole lot to speak on in the Northeast today. Enjoy a nicer day before this system ultimately comes up and affects you guys. The South Central U.S., a lot of showers and tropical downpours and storms today. This is getting into this afternoon. Could be storming pretty good in the Houston area. A lot of rain around south of Dallas. A lot of rain west of Dallas. Some storms. These could drift into the Dallas area. We'll watch for that. Could get a break this evening, and then, you know, you might get some more storms that move through these same areas as we're waking up tomorrow morning. North Central U.S. Got some showers, a little bit of energy flying through. Could get some storms in central Minnesota today. These might make it through Minneapolis late tonight with some heavy rain. This won't last long, and then we could wake up tomorrow morning in portions of northern Iowa, southeast South Dakota, northern Wisconsin, and then the western UP of Michigan, and certainly in areas of central and western Nebraska with a little bit of rain action. Nothing too crazy at all. Out west, a lot of rain will fall in Colorado today, especially like from Denver just east. You guys can see a lot of rain. Some rain definitely will be falling here in New Mexico, northern Arizona, southern and southeast Utah, and some downpours are possible here in Wyoming also. And then this will fade away with the loss of daytime heating. Temperatures today, the trough moved through very pleasant conditions, very chill conditions across the middle of the country, just 70s and 80s, just maybe even just not even getting out the 60s for areas of the Ohio Valley. And certainly if you're up in the Great Lakes region, you're starting to make that full transition to fall now, where you don't really look back, and the temperatures just gradually cool in the coming weeks to the point where it gets pretty chilly once you get in October, and you're already beginning that process up in the Great Lakes region. 60s and 70s for highs. Kind of the same thing for the Northeast. You'll have a chance to dry out today. Maybe some cloudiness might linger around. Southeast, 80s for the most part with some low 90s. Out west, warming up along the western coastline with a ridge building in. But, you know, the core of the western U.S., like the Rockies, just stick to your local people for that. Some microclimates out here. Some areas could be cool, but, you know, pretty much around average temperatures. Nothing too crazy. That's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and I'll talk to you in the next video.